Hello, and welcome to another segment of the Coatesville Area Public Library's Oral History Project. I'm your host, Kirk Witmer, and with me today we have yet another native Coatesvillian, born right here in town. Please welcome John Entrenkin. Hello, John. It's nice to have you with us today.
Glad to be here.
John, exactly where were you born? What address?
46 Chester Avenue, Coatesville, Pennsylvania.
And what is there now? Is it still a private home?
Yes.
It is.
I don't know who lives in it, but it's still a private home.
Mm-hmm.
My father built a home at 121 when I was 6 months old, and I moved from there to the address of 121 Chester Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Lived there till I got married. Lived in Parksburg for a while, Coatesville for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Then I bought a home on Chester Avenue. And then from there, I went to my present home, 157 South 10th Avenue, Coatesville. So I've been around Coatesville.
All your life.
All my life.
John, tell us what it was like growing up in Coatesville. What are some of your earlier memories?
Earlier memories. They were great. We had a great time. We made our own recreation. We didn't cause any trouble because we were well taken care of at home. Dad took care of any disciplinary problem. Mm-hmm. No questions asked. That was it. And he gave us a time to be in at night, 9 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Now, Dad didn't mean 5 minutes of, and Lord knows he didn't mean 5 after, because you knew what you're going to get when you got there. But Alan and I, my younger brother, run around a lot together. So we were pretty good shape.
You mentioned recreation and making your own recreation. Tell me about some of those things that you would do.
Well, at that time, Chester Ash, superintendent of the parks, and we had a baseball league, Columbia Avenue, James Adams, West End, and Central Park. And we played in the morning, one against one another, and had a great time. A lot of friends. Sure, you got mad once in a while, but we all came out friends. Now, we did not destroy anything. We found an old ball, we raped it with tape, or bat was broke, put screws in and tape. That's what we had. Nobody gave us nothing. And we survived, and great. Then, when I got a little older, I forget what year it was, but the YMCA had great programs. Henry Bickle, one of the greatest men I ever knew. And we'd go to the YMCA after school, 4 to 5 in one class by age. And there was 5 to 6, another age. Then after supper, 7 to 8 older boys. So we were well taken care of, And Mr. Bickle was very lenient. He had his good days and he had his bad days, which we all do. But he was a fine gentleman. Mr. Hoffman at the YMCA, one of the greatest. And at the YMCA was Cecil Lovejoy, Ray Reynolds, B.W. Atkin, Chester Narvel, George Narvel, Pete Hardy, Simmons. I can't think of his first name, from the West End. There's one thing about the YMCA. They had a boys department and a men's department. And when you, as a little boy, young man, went into the men's department, you had no business being there. You were whacked across and put in the boys department and stay there. And we appreciate that. We appreciate that.
John, you've mentioned J.I. Hoffman.
Oh,
He's a name that has come up in many of the interviews that we've conducted for our oral history of Coatesville. And you seem to think that he was the greatest, I think, as you
one of the
worded it.
greatest.
What are your observations and memories of him in particular?
Mr. Hoffman listened to you. Now, don't misunderstand me that we didn't get into some kind of trouble once in a while, and could be expelled from the YMCA maybe for 1 week, 2 weeks, depending on the problem. But he would listen to you. Don't do it again, boys, but next time remember what I'm telling you. And the greatest thing he did was for that overseas, he sent packages to the soldiers, sailors, and Marine Corps. I thought that was tremendous. But he was a fine gentleman, and he sat in his office and always spoke to you, you know. And it was just great those days. It really was great those days. And well, you asked about that. Heck McLean had a great basketball team, and Heck McLean was a fine fellow. His father owned a Star Printing Company in Coatesville. And Heck got a group of us boys out of high school, and a couple were before us out of high school, and formed a basketball team called the Star Printers. And we met at the YMCA lobby on a special night, not a special night, but a night that we were going to go somewhere. We went everywhere. We went every place. And if he told you to be there at 7 o'clock, he didn't mean 7:15 because they were gone. He didn't pick you up at home. If you couldn't walk there, don't bother. But you're talking about recreation. We had great recreation. We had great fellowship down in locker rooms, you know, after a tough basketball game. Sure, say some things you didn't mean, but you walked out after a shower and walked down the street arm in arm. It was just great.
John, I know that athletics has been a very important part of your life, and you've competed in a lot of different sports throughout the Coatesville area here. How did you first get started? I would assume it was on school teams, correct?
Prior to that, through the YMCA, through the Chester Ash Parks, you got young, you played ball. We used to play ball at 9 o'clock in the morning, go home for lunch, come back at 1 o'clock and play till 5.
Play some more,
Yeah. But you get this way of doing things, and it just grows on you. So. But we had a great time. We had a great time.
Tell me about some of your exploits, particularly in the field of baseball.
Oh, we played everybody. During the war, they had service teams, Olmsted Air Force Base, Middletown, all played. We played all those teams, and big leaguers. They brought the big time boys in. Of course, they were in the service too. They were special something in the Army, but they played ball for the relationship, the personnel relationship, and we had a great time with them. But yes, we played a lot of fun.
You've also spent quite a number of years as a Lukens employee. What was your function when you started with Lukens?
I'm glad you asked that. Often talk about this. I was employed in Lukens Steel Company October 17, 1935. Worked in UM Mill, 16 1/2 cents an hour. And when the mill broke down, which it did, you were sent home. You didn't sit down and wait till the millwright come and fixed it. You went home, called in, there's work tomorrow morning. Then I went from there to the other mills. I worked on the 140, I worked on the 2.6, the 112 at that time. We didn't have 120. And the 84-inch mill. Then I left, didn't leave there. Mr. Copeland, Percy Copeland, he asked me if I'd want to go in the office, which I did.
When you worked in the mill, what were your job duties?
Okay. My first job duties in the Universal Mill, UM Mill we call it. I worked behind the shears. Now, when I say that, they're not big shears, they're kind of small. And you cut the plates and you piled them up for them to move. Then from there, I went out up on the floor, stamping plates. Now, on a stamp plate, you stamp the heat number and the number of the ingot was and to whom it was going.
Mhm.
Then I went up on the mill. Then I threw salt on the plates as it went through the mill.
And what did that do?
Oh, it made an awful explosion. And was knocking knocked the scale off the ingot or slab, whatever. Then I left there, and as I say, I went to the 142, 6, 84, and 112, excuse me. Then I went up in the office. That way I was a production control man. I did what they called in those days heat writing. As the ingots or slabs were charged in the pits, gentlemen would bring in the slip of paper, the size, the melt, and all that. You had that all in front of you. So you copied from that paper onto another paper, wrote it all out, then you got it copied and delivered it to the mill so the man would know what he was doing.
Well, eventually you got married and started a family.
Yep.
What was it like living in Coatesville? I'm sure you had a good job at Lucan's, but what were some of the problems that you had to deal with in establishing a residence, for example?
Actually, I didn't have a problem. I had no problem. Everybody was different. You didn't have your doors locked. You didn't have to go yelling for kids. They knew where they were supposed to be and they were there or else, as simple as that. Now you think, when I'm talking to you, I think you would think that my father, for example, was a tyrant. My father was not. My father was a great man. So when he told you to be in at 9 o'clock, as I said before, he didn't mean 5 of, and he certainly didn't mean 5 after, because you knew what was going to happen. Now, it wasn't only me. Remember, I had a brother, Charles was the youngest, Alan, me, my sister Peg, Dump, and my oldest brother was Sylvester. Of course, he was up at Buck Hill Falls working, so he wasn't there. All the rest of us were home. And we had a great, great time. Christmas time, everybody was in somebody's house. And just having the greatest time you ever could, really.
John, if you would, think back and share with us some observations on changes that you've seen in and around the city, things that once were that we don't have any longer.
I can do that. In the first place, in my heyday, my father and mother walked us from Chester Avenue to Main Street, up Main Street, First Avenue. 3 of us, Charles, Allen, and I, Friday night. It was crowded, looked like Wanamaker's on Christmas Eve. Everybody knew one another. Tall. Oh, it was just something to see. And cars were parked diagonally, not like this, but diagonally then. The police department was great. Ralph Williams, he was a great chief of police. Bob Hume was another great one. And I remember, as you get over, we'd be on the corner of Chester Avenue and Main Street. A group of us, I'm saying a group, maybe 5, 10 of us, but let's say a group. And Mr. Walker, a colored cop, would come down the street with his nightstick and tap it. Boys, I'll be back in 5 minutes and I want this corner. That's all was said. Everybody had respect for one another. There was no pigs or anything like that. Everybody had respect.
And we're referring now to what years exactly?
Okay. 1930, or it might be a little earlier than that, but I'm saying 1930 to, I got married in 41, so that's about all I had in Coatesville.
Okay, that's just to give our viewers a reference as to what time frame you're referring to.
Yeah.
John, you have spent a number of years as part of the Coatesville School Board. How did that come about? What motivated you to get involved with that?
That motivation was the same thing that happened the past school board election. People got tired of the situation that was going on. Now, I say to you that Dr. Johns, when I first got on the board, was still there, but he resigned later on. He was a fine man. He wasn't saying, I'm going to do this and I want this done and this at the present time, in my opinion, is happening. He talked it over. We discussed it. But we got away from that. And I don't know why, but we did. And that was the downfall.
So you got yourself elected to the school board. What were the issues that the school district was faced with at the time? What were the problems that you had to overcome?
In 1969 to about 73, 74 was wages, teachers' wages. Of course, when you talk about teachers' wages, you're talking about everybody's wages. And
in what way? Elaborate on that for us.
They weren't making too much money in those days. Of course, nobody was. Don't misunderstand me. Nobody was. But it's not like today. Every 3 years, there's an automatic raise or something like that. In those days, we negotiated, maybe good and maybe bad, but we still negotiated it. And then Dr. Johns, he retired, and I guess from there, Dr. DeSimone came on. I'm not sure, but I'm sure it is. He was the next man. And it just got out of hand, in my opinion. Now, I'm speaking my opinion. It's out of hand. If you were my boss and told me to do something, I'd better do it or else I wouldn't have a job. Now, I understand there's rules, regulations today that you can't do that. Good or bad? I think it's bad. I worked at Luke and Steel Company, and if I didn't do what that man wanted me to do, once, okay, maybe twice, but the third time, you're gone. There was no union to back you up, there was no nothing. There was nobody to cry on. It was you alone.
Was the capacity of our buildings in terms of the number of students that we had an issue at all? Was overcrowding a problem?
Not in those days. We consolidated. I don't know what year. We consolidated. We only had Coatesville schools in my day. Craig Ridgway, Benner, Columbia Avenue, and the high school was both junior and senior high school.
John, you've mentioned Columbia Avenue twice.
Yes.
And so have a number of our other interviewees, and I've never been able to get a straight answer. Perhaps you can help me out. Where is Columbia Avenue?
Columbia Avenue is on the corner of 8th Avenue and Main Street.
Okay. So was there at one time really an avenue called Columbia Avenue?
Not that I know in Coatesville.
Then where did this...
Maybe, excuse me, I'll rescind that. Maybe they called that avenue Columbia Street or Columbia Avenue on account of the school.
I've been trying very hard to figure out how that name came about, because it's not something that I heard when I went through Terry Elementary School on the corner of 8th and Main myself back in the 50s.
Hey, you're going back a long time if that's the case. Miss Finnegan was the principal. Boy, she was a disciplinarian. Very nice, but a disciplinarian. Miss Seltzer, Miss Webb, Miss Matthews, Miss Winger.
They were all teachers there?
In Columbia Avenue. Miss Hope. That's all I can.
I notice you've pointed out to us here that they are all Miss.
Yeah.
I guess that was quite the trend in those days.
Yes. The only one I remember married was Mrs. Paxson from Parksburg, the music teacher. Helen Marshall and her sister Hilda were teachers at that school. And they had a problem with you. they put you in the clothes closet, shut the door. And of course, being young men, smart, we'd jump over and come over to the other side.
Oh, into another classroom?
No,
No?
the same classroom with boys and girls.
Aha.
Well, that didn't last too long
But
either.
that was the primary method of handling disciplinary problems
Right.
in those days.
Don't go to the principal, didn't have to. In high school, we didn't have a problem. In high school, we didn't have a problem. You talk about education, of course, he wouldn't have been in a job today. David Atwell. Didn't like him in school, but he was a gentleman all the way. Everything he did was fine. And when he couldn't take care of a problem, there was a bigger problem. He had an arm he had shot off hunting. Sometimes he had a cork, and sometimes it was just this much. But he could whale you, both of them. I mean, and when he whaled you, you didn't go home and tell Dad, Mr. Atwell had me, because you knew what was going to happen. You were whaled again and taken right back to see Mr. Atwell. But that's the trouble today. You're not allowed to touch them. I know it don't sound good, and perhaps it isn't. In my day, that's what makes the difference between me and the younger generation today. You can't tell them anything, they don't want to listen to you, and when they do, they'll curse you. So.
John, you've talked about the crowded sidewalks on the streets of downtown Coatesville and the glory days of Coatesville, and those are days that we don't see in the same light now. What do you think has been the contributing factor to that change?
The contributor factor to that change is there's no business for some of the stores uptown. And the reason for that is people aren't shopping in Coatesville. There used to be 1, 2, 3 men's stores in Coatesville. Mostellers, Tuck's, Cohen Brothers. There used to be furniture stores, Braunstein's, Lipkin, Shertock. I don't know if there was another one, not if I do, forget it. But drugstores, one at 3rd Avenue, Thompson's Drugstore, Young's Drugstore.
Now, you stumped me. Where was Young's?
Young's, at the present time, I would think that you would find that right about where Tuck's
Men's store.
men's store is at the present time. And it was a great place, great place.
What made it so great, John?
Well, you know, you went in there and you felt you were welcomed. You know, you could have a lot of fun, but there could come a time, hey, you had enough. Let's calm down. But Mr. Young was very nice, very, very. Ben Young, great ice skater. In fact, his daughter, Lillian, married Charles Pyle from Coatesville. They live in Florida. Yeah, so it was just everything. Motion picture, Palace, the auditorium. There were so many things to bring people together.
Well, John, we've seen a lot of changes. We've come from glory days to not so glorious days. What do you think lies ahead for the future of Coatesville?
Boy, that's a hard question. I would like to see it at least halfway back. Never come all the way back. Never. There's too much negativism against Coatesville. First thing you say, I'm going downtown Coatesville. What are you going down there for? Man, you're crazy. For example, these real estate people, they know what people are buying in Coatesville. They don't like Coatesville school districts. Schools, for what reason? They have good grades. There's good teachers, and there's bad teachers. Where isn't there good and bad? That's,
Exactly.
you know, my 2 children came out of Coatesville High School. My grandchildren came out of Coatesville High School. All of them are doing well. So I have no objection. I understand, or I don't understand, why there isn't more discipline The reason I say that, I live at 10th Avenue at Oak Street. I see more people, children, kids, whatever you want to call them, school age, going up over the hill than there's going to school. We used to have a truant officer. Don't have that anymore. Don't need it. Why don't we? Oh, what do? You have a child that's not going to school, brings a report card, or is called and said, "Where's your child?" What do you do about that? Father and mother go after him? I don't think so. My day, you better not bag school. But it's a change completely. It's just one of those things that I don't think we'll ever get back to that. I don't think so.
We've talked about the possibility of improving conditions in downtown Coatesville. What do you think we as a society and a community need to be working on and doing to try to make things better?
The first thing you have to do is control the streets. Loitering, for one. That's terrible. I'll put it this way. Would you send your wife uptown, Coatesville? I wouldn't send mine. Just the way I feel about it. I'm sorry if I insulted somebody. I'm just talking about myself.
John, one final question. There is a very controversial quote that has been attributed to you that has caused quite a lot of fervor among the black members of our community. However, I know that there are stories about John Entrenkin who would take one of our black high school athletes downtown and buy him a suit so that he could go on a job interview. Share your observations with us, if you would, on race relations.
I have done that. I have bought boys' glasses. I've helped them all I could help. The thing that happened, yes, it happened. That fellow was stealing wood out of my wood pile and had a bleeding scar. There's no doubt about that. I have ample proof of that. I was sitting at home, Super Sunday night, watching a ball game, football. So a neighbor called and said, "Hey, Johnny, somebody's in your wood pile." My son-in-law and my son were there. They beat me down to the wood pile, and they had a load of wood in my car. People don't know that. Well, you know, one thing led to another, and nothing happened bad, but it happened. And made him put the wood back where he got it. Then we heard the cops coming. He did too. So he got in his car, went out the alley in my home, down 10th Avenue, went out Walnut Street, down 8th Avenue, crossed Lincoln Highway to Chestnut Street. And the cops after him. Flew up Chestnut Street, went under the tunnel, 4th Avenue, up the hill, hit a tree. Now, if with all that going on, he get out and run away. They never caught him. Cop come to me and he said, "Sorry, Mr. Entrenkin, he got away." I said, "Yeah, you are sorry. You didn't want to catch him in the first place." And that's what happened. But that's the story of my remark. But I want to tell you one thing, everybody will tell you, my father said that all the time. He didn't care who it was, that's what he said. And so I guess I got it from my father. So that's the story of that incident that caused a furor in Coatesville.
Well, I thank you for sharing that viewpoint.
Thank you, thank you.
John, I want to thank you for being a participant in our oral history project today. You've certainly given us some new insights on things that have been happening here in Coatesville, and we're glad to have you as a part of it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Like to talk about old times. Reminisce. As you get older, the more you reminisce. Yes.
Thank you again, John.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kirk.